The room was silent, only the faint ticking of a clock and the soft hum of a childhood melody lingered in the air. Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's golden icon, sat alone at her dressing table. The glow of the lamp caught her face, but it wasn't the face the cameras adored. It was softer, tired, vulnerable. At 36, the world knew her as a star wrapped in diamonds and smiles, but in these final moments, she was simply a woman reflecting on a life lived under an unrelenting spotlight. Her diary lay open before her. She held the pen delicately, as if it carried the weight of her entire soul. Slowly, carefully, she began to write, capturing thoughts no camera, no script, no headline had ever captured. Her lips moved with the words as her pen pressed the page. Be brave, be gentle, be seen. The cameras loved her, but the real Marilyn Monroe was rarely seen. Behind the glitz of Hollywood, behind the laughter and the sparkling gowns, there lived a woman of contradictions. She was adored, yet lonely. She was glamorous, yet deeply insecure. And behind every dazzling smile, there was a story she almost never shared. Marilyn had relationships the world never saw. Directors who admired her, actors who adored her, friends who tried desperately to protect her. Some were genuine, others opportunistic. She was fiercely loyal to those she loved, yet more often than not, it was the same people who left her broken. One of her closest friends once remembered Marilyn laughing softly, then falling silent, her eyes drifting away. She whispered, "They only love the idea of me, not who I really am." That truth haunted her. She had small habits that no spotlight ever captured. Marilyn would sit quietly in a corner, tapping her fingers to an unheard rhythm, humming melodies from her childhood. It was her way of holding on to something real, tiny rituals that grounded her in a world that felt unreal. On set, she was tested again and again. There was an incident with another rising actress, Acosta, who tried to cut her down, criticizing her acting to claim control. Marilyn didn't fight with words. She simply looked her in the eyes and said, calm, steady, unshaken, "I don't need approval, only truth in my performance." The room went silent. That was Marilyn, gentle, yet unbreakable. Her loves were as complicated as her spirit. She loved passionately, trusted easily, but fame made true intimacy rare. With Joe DiMaggio, there was tenderness, but also distance. With Arthur Miller, she found intellect, but also heartbreak. She once told a friend, her voice trembling, "I don't want someone who only loves the surface. I want someone who sees the chaos inside, and still chooses to stay." On camera, she sparkled. Off camera, she was dissected by directors, by co-stars, by the media. She was called a genius, and called troubled. She carried both labels with quiet endurance. Every scene, every line, every smile, she gave it all, layering her art with the pain and longing she hid so carefully. And yet, even in her final days, she clung to her rituals. In the quiet of her room, Marilyn would write in her diary, pages filled with confessions of love, disappointment, and dreams slipping through her fingers. She left herself small reminders: be brave, be seen, be loved, for real. Those fragile words revealed more of her heart than any interview ever could. Her last conversations were soft, almost like fading echoes. She spoke of love lost, love desired, of friendships betrayed, of memories she cherished. To one close friend, she whispered, "If only they knew me as I know myself, maybe they would understand why I laugh and cry." The very same day. And that was Marilyn, the duality of light and shadow. Marilyn Monroe's career was nothing short of extraordinary. She lit up the screen in more than 30 films, but a few roles etched her name into eternity. In Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, she became Lorelei, glamorous, witty, irresistible. With that performance, Marilyn wasn't just acting, she was defining an era. An icon was born. In The 7-Year Itch, 1955, a single moment changed pop culture forever. The white dress scene, wind, swirling, smile playful, innocence mingled with allure, became one of the most famous images in cinema history. It wasn't just a scene, it was a symbol, a memory that still lingers across decades. And then, Some Like It Hot, 1959, her sugar cane was funny, tender, and unforgettable. Marilyn's charm radiated, her vulnerability shone through, and her comedic brilliance stunned even the harshest critics. For this role, she won a Golden Globe, but more importantly, she won hearts that would never stop loving her. Yet Marilyn was more than her films. She was a movement. Girls in the 1950s and 60s copied her makeup, her hair, her style. Men dreamed, women admired, and the world watched copied. And even today, generations later, people still return to her movies. They laugh at her sparkle. They cry at her fragility. They feel her humanity in every glance, every gesture, every pause. Marilyn Monroe's life reminds us of a truth we often forget. Fame is both a gift and a burden. Applause is loud, but love can be fleeting, and sometimes the words and whispers left behind carry more power than the cheers of millions. She was not just an actress. She was a phenomenon. A woman who redefined beauty, who embodied vulnerability, who carried strength even in fragility. Even now, when her films flicker across the screen, audiences feel it. The laughter, the longing, the ache, the joy. They feel what her contemporaries felt because her story, her presence, her soul, are timeless. Marilyn Monroe's legacy is not just one of glamour, it is one of depth, one of contradictions, one of enduring grace. She was, and will always remain, a portrait of light and shadow. A reminder that behind every icon, there lives a human being, unforgettable, fragile, eternal. Marilyn Monroe's personal life was as complex as it was fragile. She married Joe DiMaggio, the great American baseball hero. Their love was real, tender, and passionate, but also burdened by misunderstandings. Joe adored her, but he struggled with the world's obsession over her. Their marriage, though brief, left behind an ache of what could have been. Later, she found herself drawn to playwright Arthur Miller. With him, she sought not just love, but understanding. Their union carried the weight of intellect and companionship. Yet fame's harsh glare and emotional distance slowly eroded what could have been a sanctuary. To the public, she was perfection. To those close to her, she was a woman longing for safety in a world that rarely offered it. Many admired Marilyn's beauty, her voice, her smile, but only a very few saw the woman beneath the icon. She trusted too easily, and when the trust broke, the wound cut deep. Again and again, she longed for connection. Again and again, the world mistook her soul for her image. Behind the curtain of fame, Marilyn found solace in small rituals. She wrote in her diary soft lines, gentle reminders, quiet prayers. She surrounded herself with close friends, clung to simple routines, and whispered truths no headline would ever carry. What she wanted was not applause, not diamonds, not more cameras. She wanted only this, to be loved for who she truly was. The morning light crept gently over Los Angeles on August 4, 1962. Inside a quiet home on 5th Helena Drive, Marilyn Monroe opened her eyes. She was 36 years old. To the world, she was a shimmering goddess, the luminous face of Hollywood. But to those closest to her, she was a fragile soul, often struggling beneath the weight of her own golden smile. She began her day with familial rituals that gave her a sense of control in a life that often felt borrowed. Breakfast was simple: eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice. Nothing extraordinary. Yet, in its ordinariness, there was comfort. She lingered over her diary, scribbling soft reminders to herself. 3 small phrases: be brave, be gentle, be seen. Those words were not for the cameras. They were for survival. Later, a close friend stopped by. They spoke in gentle tones about new projects, about roles she longed to play. She laughed at a silly anecdote, her laugh soft, like a child's, before pausing to sip her tea. At times, she hummed to herself those same melodies from childhood she used to calm the storms inside her. In those brief moments, the Hollywood star disappeared. What remained was Norma, tender, thoughtful, human. In the afternoon, she met with her secretary. They spoke of schedules, appointments, appearances, but her heart wasn't in it. Her gaze wandered toward photographs of loved ones. She touched them lightly, almost reverently, as if afraid they might fade. She rearranged flowers on her table, her hands careful, delicate. These small, private acts carried more meaning for her than the flashing bulbs of any premiere. Her last meal, too, was modest. Nothing glamorous, nothing staged. She ate quietly, slowly, as though savoring not the food, but the stillness. Friends who visited that day remembered her soft manners, her slow, thoughtful way of speaking. She often paused mid-sentence, choosing her words with care, almost as though she were writing the final lines of her own story. As evening fell, Marilyn retreated into her solitude. With pen in hand, she wrote one last time in her diary. The pages carried fragments of love, fragments of longing, fragments of a woman searching for peace. At one point, she whispered aloud, so faint it was almost carried away by silence, "I hope tomorrow is kinder." But tomorrow never came. That night, the world lost Marilyn Monroe, 36 years old, found in her Los Angeles home. The official cause, probable suicide by overdose. A single, devastating line that ended a life the world thought it knew, but never truly understood. She left behind more than 30 films, a Golden Globe, and an iconography that would define beauty and fame for generations. But beyond that, beyond the diamonds, beyond the red lips, beyond the endless photographs, Marilyn left behind a fragile truth, that even those who shine brightest can be swallowed by shadows. Her final day is not just a story of tragedy, it is a reminder. Behind every headline, there is a heartbeat. Behind every idol, a human being. Behind Marilyn Monroe, there was Norma Jean, a woman who laughed, who cried, who loved deeply, and who longed for connection in a world that loved her image more than her soul. And so, as we remember her today, decades later, we must not only recall the bombshell in glittering gowns, we must also remember the quiet woman who hummed childhood melodies, who wrote fragile hopes in her diary, who whispered into the silence, "I hope tomorrow is kinder," because perhaps, in honoring both the light and the darkness, we finally see Marilyn Monroe as an untouchable icon, but as she truly was, a woman, a dreamer, a soul both fragile and unforgettable. Glamour and grief. A star, yes, but more than that, a woman who longed to be known. Her story is not just Hollywood's story. It is the story of every soul who has ever felt unseen. Behind every smile, there is pain. Behind every laugh, a shadow. Behind every icon, there is a fragile, beating heart, longing for connection. And when the lights dimmed on another Hollywood set, Marilyn Monroe sat quietly, humming those childhood melodies, pen in hand, writing words no one else would ever read. She was reflecting on her loves, her friendships, and the truth she carried alone. Proof that behind every camera, every smile, there was a life fully lived, fully felt, and never fully understood. Final whispered words, "I hope tomorrow is kinder," were more than a goodbye. They were a plea, a fragile hope from a woman who gave the world so much joy, yet often received so little understanding in return. And still, her legacy endures. Decades later, actresses study her presence, her vulnerability, her magic. Her influence is unmistakable, in the subtle glamour of Scarlett Johansson, in the playful charm of Margot Robbie, in every star who dares to balance allure with vulnerability. Marilyn's shadow lives on. But now, I want to turn to you. If Marilyn Monroe were alive today, which roles do you believe would have set her soul on fire? Would she still be the queen of comedic charm? Would she have emerged as a dramatic powerhouse? Or perhaps, would she have become the heroine of biographical films, telling stories of women who fought and loved as fiercely as she did? Her story reminds us of something timeless. Behind every icon lies a human being. Behind every perfect smile lies a heart that aches, that dreams, that beats just like ours. Marilyn Monroe was not only a goddess of the silver screen, she was a woman who laughed, who loved, who stumbled, who dreamed of kindness, and though she left this world too soon, her voice, fragile yet powerful, still speaks to us today.